Welcome back, and welcome to our What's Up Doc segment. At this time, our students are going to ask you some questions. We have students from Clearwater Fundamental and Clearwater High School. Maria, do you have a question for Dr. Seville?
Yes. What are the most common types of mental health problems in teens?
Well, Maria, that is a wonderful question. I really appreciate you participating in this very important day, and I'm happy to talk to you and all the other students listening about that topic. The two most common things we see are going to be anxiety and depression. The honest truth is that they can really be looked at together because they're on this kind of an opposite end of the same continuum. There are many people you might know who are very anxious and get nervous so often that they get depressed about that. Or people who are very, very sad for a reason they don't understand, which gives them some anxiousness. But let's talk about them individually because it's important for you to know and how to kind of pay attention to your friends and perhaps family to maybe be able to help them. Depression, of course, can be defined as sadness that doesn't make any sense. In other words, we can all be sad. Something we saw on TV, something that happened to a friend, perhaps a bad grade we got, maybe a relationship that ended, a love affair or some kind of a friendship that suddenly took a turn for the worse based on something. And that would be normal to be sad about that. But depression is where people seem to be too sad for what is going on or for no reason at all. And that's something really important to think about. You might see your friends acting in a way you don't understand, or you yourself might feel sad in a way that you can't understand. It would be important to talk to your parents or talk to your friends or talk to someone at school about that. Anxiety, kind of the opposite end, are people who feel very anxious, very scared perhaps, or very jumpy for reasons they don't understand. Now, some of that is normal. If you have a test and you're not sure you studied enough, or if you know something special is coming up and you don't know that you're prepared for it, you might feel very nervous about that. Perhaps you don't like to fly or go on a vacation. But oftentimes, people can be sitting in class and all of a sudden they feel very nervous for a reason they don't understand. Or perhaps people are lying in bed at night and wake up from a dead sleep to be sitting straight up in bed, nervous, wondering if they just heard or saw something. And that can be one way anxiety shows you. So I think it's important to know the difference, but to understand how they are related. And to know that if you or someone you love feels that way, that either you or you help someone get help so that they can figure that out and might make their lives better.
And now we have some questions from students from Clearwater High School.
Wonderful.
Keenan, do you have a question for Dr. Seville?
Yes, I do. What should I do if my friend is talking about hurting him or herself?
Keenan, I really can't thank you enough for asking that question, because you and I know that a lot of things are happening in our society today here in Pinellas County and other places. And we all know of stories like this. And so I appreciate you participating today and getting this conversation going. Here's the thing I want to tell you, and it's an overlying theme that I talk to my patients and my own daughter about all the time. I want you to think about this when you lie in bed tonight. I want you to become the kind of person who's willing to lose a friend to save somebody's life. In other words, if you believe that somebody you know well or not so well is becoming sad or depressed, or you really believe that some threat they've made or some way they are acting could lead to them trying to do some harm to themselves, it's important that you talk to that person right away about it. And if you don't think it's appropriate to do so, go to the teacher or go to the counselor, even behind that person's back. Do you know how often every year people sit at a funeral and think, wow, maybe if I'd said something to somebody about something I heard. And I'm not trying to make this a sad conversation. The truth is, most time people are going to say something like that as a cry out for help, because they really don't want to do that, but they want you to hear them and they want you to do something about it. And even if you say something to somebody and maybe you took something out of context, it doesn't matter, because you could save somebody's life. Even if that friend or acquaintance was angry with you because they thought it wasn't any of your business, and then that person got called into the counselor, who cares? You could have saved somebody's life. So I want you to think about that very, very profound thing. Be the kind of friend, again, who's willing to lose a friend to save somebody's life. If there's ever a question in your mind about that, I hope that you'll stop doing what you're doing and seek help. Our schools are amazing places to get that help because we have counselors set up everywhere to help you and will know what to do when you mention it. However, if it isn't in school, you're talking to your friend outside of school or perhaps a family member, talk to your parents, talk to their parents, talk to any adult, and they'll know what to do. Again, I really appreciate, Keenan, that you took the time to participate. This kind of question could really save people's lives.
Gladys, do you have a question for Dr. Seville?
I do. What are some signs that someone may be suicidal?
Gladys, thank you so much for participating today again and for starting this conversation because, again, I bet there are many people who are wondering the very same thing. Well, everybody's different, and we do know that people can be depressed for a number of reasons, or sad, or thinking about doing something to themselves. Something happened with a bad test, perhaps, or a breakup. So maybe you have some history about that person, and you are afraid already that they might be thinking of doing harm to themselves. But here's the things I want you to look for. Let's say you have a friend or an acquaintance who suddenly becomes a different person. That person becomes more withdrawn, isn't so talkative anymore, walking around with their head down in more ways than you might imagine. Or somebody who suddenly starts giving away possessions you couldn't imagine. Somebody who walks in and has a beautiful shirt or some kind of a book or something they've always loved and they want to know if you want to have it, and you can't imagine how they would have ever given that item away. Of course, somebody who talks about hurting themselves, somebody who tells you how much better the world would be if they were not a part of it. Those are a cry out for help, perhaps. Maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously. But sometimes it's just a feeling you get that people aren't acting the way they should. Because you know that sometimes people turn to other substances as a way to medicate themselves when they're sad. You might think, that person acts like he or she is on drugs. And maybe there are or are not drugs involved, but if somebody's acting differently than they were acting and you can't understand why that is, make sure you talk to an adult immediately, because that could be the kind of decision you make, which might step on someone's toes, that could save that person's life. Again, it's so amazing that you guys are participating today, because people have questions like this, and you were brave enough to ask it, and this discussion could really have a positive impact on the people you know and society in general.
Stephanie, do you have a question for Dr. Seville?
Yes, I do. Do some mental health problems run in families?
Stephanie, thanks for being here today, and thank you for asking that very important question. We can look at this thing two ways. It's difficult, because oftentimes when it's discovered that there is some mental illness in a middle school or high school student, it is well known that their mom and dad or both had anxiety and or depression, and maybe they knew all of their lives that they were destined to find themselves in this situation as well. We always talk about nature and nurture. The nature of the situation means that you might be genetically predisposed to being sadder than other people or more anxious than other people, so people pay attention to that. The nurture is the way you were raised. Maybe there isn't any genetic makeup for you to be sad or depressed, but you live in a home where there's a great deal of stress. Maybe a bad marriage, maybe there's some very serious illness, maybe grandma or grandpa have come to live with you and they have cancer and they're in your home, but they are dying, and that obviously is the most stressful thing in the world. But what is also important to know, and I want you to hear this very clearly, just because there is a history of mental illness in the family doesn't mean that you or somebody else is destined to have that. It is not your lot in life. It does not mean this is the way life is going to be. And how many kids I know become sad because they think, I'm going to end up like my parents. And that is not always the case. But what I really want you to hear and be the take-home message from your question, and the take-home answer from what you have asked me is 80 or 90% of the people can have what others might view as mental illness at any given time. So if you feel, or others you feel, know that they don't feel the way society does, if they believe that they are more nervous or they are sadder than other people, that's a reason to cry out for help. and not a reason to feel that there's something wrong with you, because there may be a very simple solution to all of that. I tell patients every day there is not a human being alive, including myself, who wouldn't benefit from a mental health professional to be a sounding board. When you have a sore throat, you go to the pediatrician like me. But when you're feeling sad or anxious, you should seek the wisdom of somebody else as well. Maybe that problem goes away immediately, but I hope that you're going to be going off to college very soon. And by learning the coping mechanisms a psychologist or psychiatrist or mental health professional can teach you, you might be able to help yourself a year or 2 or 3 from now when you're feeling sad or anxious about a test or some other issue, when you're off in a dorm and far from people you know that well. Or you might be able to help somebody else get the help he or she needs. So this question is a complicated one, but one that is so very important. But I hope that if you're speaking of yourself, you'll talk to somebody. Or if you're thinking about other people, you'll get them help. Love your mom and dad and those who have brought you to this world. But if you're afraid that your life is destined to be like that of somebody else, maybe it isn't. The most important take-home message always is, life is worth living. We live in the most amazing place in the world, and no matter what things happen that make us sad or anxious, there's always an answer. Just like there's an answer when you have a sore throat and you go see somebody, there's an answer when you're feeling sad or happy. Sometimes kids lose hope because they don't think that's the case. But that answer is available too. Make sure you find the help that you or somebody else needs. That kind of thing can save lives everywhere.
Dr. Seville, we have one more question from a student at Clearwater Fundamental. Jayden, do you have a question for Dr. Seville?
Yes. Does mental illness ever get better or go away?
Jayden, that's a fantastic question, and I appreciate that you took the time to participate today and were brave enough to ask that. You know, that's a very complicated question, but let's talk about something. Again, we talk about nature and nurture. The nature, whether or not you are predetermined to have depression or anxiety because it is in your family genetics, just like some people have blonde hair or darker hair or are tall or are short. And the nature of things is there. The nurture talks about the situation at hand, and that's the important thing. Because if you find yourself depressed or anxious because you've just had a breakup from a relationship, then that in time goes away when you learn how to deal with it. Or if there's been test anxiety, when the test is done, then that situation is over. But people who have genetically mediated anxiety or depression may have that for the rest of their lives and may be treated with medication. But let's stop for a minute and think about this. Diabetes. People have high blood sugar, their pancreas stops making insulin. They take insulin, whether by injection or pills as they get older. They'll have that for the rest of their lives. But if they take the medicine they need, they'll live the same long life as someone who didn't need that at all. And the same thing holds true for mental illness. When it is treated appropriately, be it by medication or therapy or what have you, you have the same life that anybody else has. There's such a stigma on mental illness. People think if you need medication or you need counseling, there's something wrong with you. Do you know how many lives we'd save every year if people would stop thinking that way? If they would look at sadness or anxiety the same way we look at a sore throat or an ingrown toenail? Because there really is no difference. And I don't mean to minimize any of it, but my point is that find the help you need or others need, and even if you have to live with something for the rest of your life, there are ways to do that that give you a normal life. And the great thing is, the greatest legacy you can have for people who have anxiety or depression and get help is that you might be the person who understands that better than others and might be the one who sees somebody else who's happy or sad or anxious and can get them the help they need. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? By becoming self-aware, you become more aware of others, and lives can be saved or lives can be made better because you intervened on their behalf. I think that would be the greatest thing of all. You know, these days we have a lot of stressors, and a lot of people are upset by the things they read in the news and the things that are going on all over our globe and in this country. And it can give anyone anxiety and depression, to be honest with you. But if we come together as a community, as a county, as a school system, as a state, as a country, and as a world to help each other out, that makes it a better place for all of us to live. Because we're still the luckiest people on the face of the earth to be where we are, but sometimes it does take a village to help everybody to see that. Be a part of that village, make a difference in your own life and the lives of others, and we're all better off for it. Thanks again for asking such a great question. It means the world to me personally.
And thank you, Dr. Seville. Great answers, important topic, very important topic. I appreciate that you're bringing up the supports that the school system has for them.
Absolutely.
We have guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists in every school, mental health counselors in many of the schools, and that's thanks to partnerships with Juvenile Welfare Board, with Pinellas County government by supporting a nurse in every school.
Definitely.
It really does take a village. So thank you again, and when we come back, we're going to take some questions from some elementary students.